like almost like 80% or over 80% of all of this. The Scots and the Welsh are not so numerous. The same was in the 18th century, of course. Although in those days the whole populations of the British Isles were like 10 million, and now it's like 6 times that number. Okay, so also the interesting factor in this was that the reason for revolting against the British Crown or British Parliament even, although they were perceiving this conflict as more revolting against the British Crown, this archaic branch of government. So the very interesting factor is that this conflict was not only fought on ideology. It was not only based on ideology. Of course, there were many these very sincere liberal ideas among among the elites of Massachusetts, New York. New York basically was undecided and wanted, in a huge number, also was for the British America. So maybe it's not a good example, but Massachusetts, Virginia, and so on, they were some part of the elite was very much preoccupied with this liberal tendencies, liberal philosophy, and so on, and that was a huge component to the reasons of why they were fighting against the British. But in the same time, there were more egoistic reasons for revolting also. And the American historians are usually, but not always, I give them some credit, not always, they are, but very often they are reluctant to mention that the reasons for revolting was also of egoistic nature. For instance, this elite of Virginia, those plantation owners like Jefferson, Washington, they were usually highly in debt, and they were in debt also with British tradesmen from London. And what is the best way to get rid of these debts? Just to create their own country, right? The very similar way it was used. I am not comparing them to this situation to another situation, but there were wars started in order to not pay debts. For instance, Hitler wanted not to pay the contributions after World War I and started the war. not to continue, in order not to continue paying those contributions to the powers that won World War I. So it's not such a bad idea from the Machiavellian point of view to start your own country in order not to pay debts, and it's also a very important factor in this war. The last very interesting element about this conflict, the American War of Independence, and the second British or English Civil War, because the first was in the 17th century with chopping off the head of the king and Charles I and Stuart and so on. And very interesting element is also the question of Indians, Native Americans, and Black Americans, the slaves, and other, because not all of them were slaves back then already. So with Indians, the British limitations put upon the colonists were of various nature. They wanted the Americans not to have their own industry. They wanted the Americans to buy British products, basically. The other limitation was that they shouldn't be settling across the Appalachian Mountains. And that was this second limitation was very much suitable. It suited the Indians, the Native Americans, very well, because they were basically in this situation. They would have they would continue to have a monopoly on those territories, on using those territories, and they were very pleased with